I rise to advise the House that the Labor opposition will support the bill going to Select Committee. However, we are going to use this first reading speech to indicate to the Government the sorts of changes that we would like to see occur with the legislation in order for us to support it beyond the Select Committee. I actually hope that we are able to achieve the kinds of changes that we want to see occur with this piece of legislation, because, as the Minister has stated in his introductory comments, in fact, those of us on this side of the House that have played a role in both economic policy, commerce policy and regulatory responsibility have taken the view that one of the areas of commonality between New Zealand and Australia where we could really use as a platform for mutual growth would be a shared productivity commission across on a trans-Tasman basis. The Australian Productivity Commission, of course, would be something that I would hold in very high regard, and I've said on more than one occasion that I would have liked to have seen that as a core focus of any government's agenda, and that's to build that relationship up into a single focus on how we engage with our closest neighbours about improving productivity right across the board. This bill has an underlying flaw, and that's probably in its genesis. And I think that when the Prime Minister stated after the last election in his promise to be ambitious for New Zealand that we should catch up with Australia, I think that there were some people felt that that actually lacked ambition in its own right. But here we have an opportunity to catch up with Australia, and we're kind of missing the boat a wee bit in that regard. He agreed as part of the Confidence and Supply Agreement with the ACT Party to promote the concept, or to look at the concept of a productivity commission, and I think justifiably the Minister has paid tribute to the Honourable Rodney Hyde as Minister for Regulatory Responsibility for promoting this as part of the Confidence and Supply Agreement, and then delivering on that in joint signatures to Cabinet papers with the Minister of Finance. I don't think it's fair not to give him full credit for that, because really I don't think that the government would have been introducing this legislation without the work of the Honourable Rodney Hyde, and I certainly pay tribute to him for that. The 2025 task force, on the other hand, which is led by Don Brash, was given the task of the Catch Up with Australia part of the deal, and it actually seemed a rather odd appointment to me. I don't know whether anyone else thought it was strange that you would appoint the person who was actually the Reserve Bank Governor at the time that the gap was actually created. Why would you put them in charge of a 2025 task force to reduce the gap between New Zealand and Australia? It just seemed absolutely bizarre to me. But when we actually look at all of the proposals that have been put forward in the first report to the government from that 2025 task force led by Don Brash, it's actually not, well, it is even more surprising, because of course they're designed to take us further and further away from catching up with Australia. So it's actually not surprising to me that when I read the Cabinet papers behind this particular bill, I found a very clear distancing between this bill, this proposal to have a productivity commission, and the 2025 task force. And we're told in the Cabinet papers that in fact they're quite different. Let me quote from the first Cabinet paper. This work is distinct from the 2025 task force. It is envisaged that a possible New Zealand Productivity Commission would be a permanent institution that carries out reviews and inquiries and potentially other functions identified in the further analysis based on a work plan agreed by the government. The task force is an independent group of experts appointed for a 3-year term to advise the government on policies and institutions that will assist in closing the income gap with Australia by 2025. And the distinction that they're actually drawing is between having a work plan agreed by the government, which means that the government gets to set the agenda for the Productivity Commission, but the task force can do say anything it likes and the government can completely ignore it, which of course they are doing exactly. And I think I know why. It was when I picked up the Dominion last week and I found here on the 16th of July 2010 this headline: Brash blows fees budget. Well, that's because he doesn't know anything about productivity at all. He's managed to spend the entire 3-year budget for his meeting fees in just 1 year. Well, I don't know. I mean, how good is that you've got Don Brash in this role with this fees budget absolutely blown to smithereens in the first year, 4 times the amount earmarked for his first year on the task force. Well, I mean, I don't think that this man can teach us anything about productivity, which is probably not surprising, given the contribution that he has made to the mess that this country found itself in after his period as the Reserve Bank Governor. Now, if this bill has anything to do with catching up with Australia, and I actually would like to think that it did, then why is it narrower than its Australian counterpart? That's really the question that we have for the government. We don't agree with the minister who introduced the bill that this bill has a broader mandate. In fact, we are absolutely clear that it has a much narrower mandate than the Australian mandate. And in that regard, this is a bill that lacks ambition. It is not ambitious for New Zealand. Now, let me just run through the Commission's legislative instructions in Australia. This is the Productivity Commission in Australia. They are to improve the productivity and economic performance of the economy. There is an understanding in Australia that productivity is not a narrow aspect of the work that a government is required to have input into. It's very broad. Reduce unnecessary regulation. Encourage the development of efficient and internationally competitive Australian industries. Well, I would love the government to have a view on encouraging the development of efficient and internationally competitive New Zealand industries. Facilitate adjustment to structural change. Recognise the interest of the community generally and all those likely to be affected by its proposals. Promote regional employment and development. With regard to Australia's international commitments, read New Zealand's commitments and the trade policies of other countries, and ensure Australian, read New Zealand industry develops in ecologically sustainable ways. That's the sort of terms of reference that this side of the House would like to see for a productivity commission for New Zealand. Mr. Speaker, I want us to catch up. I actually would like us to have a slightly more ambitious target than that, because we were caught up with Australia before Don Brash was the Governor of the Reserve Bank and other changes happened. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by going to the regulatory impact statement. And the Minister, Rodney Hyde, will know how much I love regulatory impact statements. But I want to just remind this House what the problem definition that the government formulated in order to justify the establishment of a productivity commission. They said that productivity-related matters, they received advice, the government received advice from government departments, task forces, not very good ones in this case, commissions of inquiry and international organisations. But there needed to be something. There was a gap for a new and independent institution with specialised internal investigative capacity and a mandate to actively survey the views of a range of stakeholders and to undertake inquiries. Now, this is the sort of the case for such an agency is made in the context of New Zealand's current economic challenges. These include regulatory settings that are believed to be constraining investment and limiting productivity growth, R&D expenditure that is below the OECD average, future limits on resource use in relation to freshwater supply, marine space, fisheries and the assimilative capacity of the atmosphere, soil, waterways and groundwater, relative low rates of participation in education and training amongst some population groups, e.g. some age groups, socio-economic groups and Māori and Pacific Island peoples, inadequate infrastructure in some areas and low domestic savings and shallow equity and bond markets. Mr Speaker, that is the aspirational level of work that we want to see for a productivity commission, and when this bill matches that aspiration,